I'm Veronica Dudo. Tonight on EWTN News Nightly, a final farewell.
Lebanon is more than a country. It is a message.
The Holy Father wraps up his first apostolic trip with one final appeal. We're in Beirut. Drug boat attacks, heightened rhetoric, and calls for regime change. EWTN News has a report from Venezuela as tensions rise. Plus, protecting children. A group of bills on Capitol Hill target potential online dangers. We look at what they say. These stories and more right now.
From EWTN, the Global Catholic Network, this is EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you for being with us on the feast of St. Bibiana, our top story tonight. Pope Leo is now back in Rome, wrapping up his first apostolic trip to Turkey and Lebanon. But before leaving, he made one final appeal to the Lebanese people. EWTN News Vatican journalist Magdalena Walensky-Reedy reports from Beirut.
On his last day in Lebanon, at the conclusion of his very first papal trip abroad, that took him through two countries in a volatile region of the Middle East, Pope Leo XIV offered a silent prayer at the site of the 2020 Beirut port explosion. In an emotional moment, he met with families and survivors of the explosion, which killed 236 people and devastated large parts of the city, leaving more than 7,000 wounded. During his 3 days in the land of the Cedars, Pope Leo sought to bring a message of peace to Lebanon as it continues to struggle with years of economic, political and migrant crisis. He also encouraged Christians in the region to remain courageous and steadfast in faith.
You are a people who do not give up, but in the face of trials, you always know how to rise again with courage. Your resilience is an essential characteristic of authentic peacemakers. For the work of peace is indeed a continuous starting anew.
A highlight of the day was a public mass in the country's capital city, filled with colorful flags and banners bearing the Pope's image.
At the closing mass here in Beirut before his departure for Rome, Pope Leo urged the people of Lebanon to hold on to gratitude and hope despite the crisis. Let us disarm our hearts and awake the dream of a united Lebanon. The Holy Father told the 150,000 people gathered here at the waterfront.
The central theme of the Pope's journey was "Blessed are the peacemakers," a message that resonated deeply with all the people of Lebanon.
We need peace very much. This is why we're all here, and I bet that a lot of the people here are not even Christians, but they are looking for peace and hoping for peace. This is why everyone is here since the early morning.
We're always starving for peace. We're asking the Lord to give us peace, and now the Pope is coming to pray with us and to be a symbol of peace in this. We pray that the peace will remain always.
As we saw yesterday during the incredibly enthusiastic meeting with over 15,000 young people from all over Lebanon, the crowd was joyful and grateful for these blessed days of the Pope's presence in the region.
I feel like the Pope's visit to Lebanon is a great opportunity, especially for us as the young generation. We all would like to stay here in Lebanon, build on our dreams. I hope the visit of the Pope will bring peace and prosperity to all of the Lebanese people.
At the farewell ceremony at the airport before his return to Rome, concluding 6 days of pilgrimage, an emotional Pope said, "While arriving in your country meant gently entering into your culture, leaving this land means carrying you in my heart." He left behind a final lasting message from this journey, a strong appeal for peace.
In embracing all of you, I express my aspiration for peace, along with a heartfelt appeal. May the attacks and hostilities cease. We must recognize that armed struggle brings no benefit. While weapons are lethal, negotiation, mediation, and dialogue are constructive. Let us all choose peace as a way and not just as a goal. Let us remember what St. John Paul II reaffirmed while in your midst. Lebanon is more than a country. It is a message.
In Beirut, Lebanon, Magdalena Wolinska-Riedi for EWTN News Nightly.
On his way back from Lebanon, Pope Leo was asked about the growing tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela. This is what he had to say.
Sobre Venezuela.
Regarding Venezuela at the level of the Episcopal Conference with the Nuncio, we are looking for ways to calm the situation, seeking, above all, the good of the people, because so often it is the people who suffer in these situations, not the authorities. The voices coming from the United States change with a certain frequency. Sometimes one has to observe. It seems there has been a telephone conversation between the two presidents.
In Washington, President Trump and Secretary of War Pete Hegseth also talked about Venezuela. Secretary of War Hegseth has come under criticism for a strike in September where supposed survivors of the initial blast were killed in a second hit. He and the president were asked about the incident at a cabinet meeting today.
All I know is this: every boat that you see get blown up, we save 25,000 on average lives. 25,000 lives.
I watched that first strike live. As you can imagine, at the Department of War, we got a lot of things to do. So I didn't stick around for the hour and 2 hours, whatever, where all the sensitive site exploitation digitally occurs. So I moved on to my next meeting. A couple of hours later, I learned that that commander had made which he had the complete authority to do. And by the way, Admiral Bradley made the correct decision to ultimately sink the boat and eliminate the threat.
Let's get the view from Caracas. Andres Enriquez is a reporter with ASI Prensa, a service of EWTN News. Thanks for your time. Can you tell us what is the situation in Venezuela right now?
Thank you so much for having me. Well, the situation in the country is truly tense. We are living under a constant flow of information and news about what may or may not end up happening with the United States military deployment in the Caribbean. And I think that when we talk about this, we must remember that we are not talking about a regular democratic elected president. Maduro's approval rating among Venezuelans is virtually nil. And this guy represents a criminal system that stole presidential elections last year, a system that has destroyed also Venezuelan economy, subjecting millions of people to hunger, and with ridiculous salaries of under $100 per month, a system that has relentlessly persecuted its opponents, many of whom are ordinary citizens. Just last year, Maduro imprisoned hundreds of minors, boys and girls, just because they sent a WhatsApp message against the regime to their families or to their friends. And even the bishops and the cardinals have been terribly harassed by the regime's police across these years. So I think that this terrible situation has led Venezuelans to see a glimmer of light and hope in the help that the United States can provide to achieve freedom and peace in the country.
So I wanted to ask you what people there are saying about the U.S. strikes on Venezuelan boats. And of course, you just detailed what it's been like for Venezuelans who are living under the corruption and the alleged narco ties within the government.
Yes, so in Venezuela, everyone knows that drug trafficking is one of the main means by which the Chavista system is financed. And with this drug money, Maduro maintains his repressive apparatus and funds loyalties to stay in power for as long as possible. It is true that many fishing villages here are controlled by drug traffickers, and I think that we all can agree that this represents a danger not only for Venezuelans but for the entire region. And maybe we can discuss if the legality of these actions within the American or the international legal framework. But the reality in Venezuela is that Maduro is the leader of a drug and terrorism cartel that has done a great deal of damage, not only to our country, but to the entire hemisphere as well.
What is the sentiment on the ground about people seeing the United States talking about this issue and actually doing something?
I personally think that the Trump administration operations against drug trafficking are making Chavista regime tremble. And although the possibility of a regime change is not being openly discussed here, well, as I said before, I think that Venezuelans are following what's happening in the country's coast with great attention and a great deal of hope too.
Andres Enriquez, thank you so much, and we'll continue to cover this story.
Thank you so much for having me.
Former Honduran President Juan Orlando Hernandez was released from a U.S. prison yesterday after being granted a presidential pardon by Donald Trump. Hernandez was serving a 45-year sentence for conspiring to import hundreds of tons of cocaine into the United States and was convicted in a U.S. court last year. His wife, Ana Garcia, announced his release on social media, thanking President Trump for the pardon. Trump's decision to pardon Hernandez, a political ally, comes just before a tense presidential election vote count in Honduras. Now back to that cabinet meeting held on live TV. President Trump also addresses the ongoing war in Ukraine, which he calls crazy. U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and President Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner met today with Russian President Putin in Moscow, discussing prospects for peace. This as President Trump lamented that the number of deaths caused every month by the war is equivalent to half of a football stadium filled with people. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen.
Veronica, as that war rages, launched back in 2022, President Trump says in his words he wants to save a lot of souls. Meanwhile, it's not clear if those peace talks today amounted to anything.
In the cabinet room surrounded by top officials, President Donald Trump tells reporters,
I've settled 8 wars. This would be the 9th, and our people are over in Russia right now to see if we can get it settled. Not an easy situation, let me tell you. What a mess.
At the same time, the president hopeful he can save lives.
We're trying very hard to save 25 to 30,000 people, mostly men, mostly soldiers, every month.
Sitting around another table, this one across the globe in Moscow, U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, discussing a draft peace plan. Putin, however, ahead of the talks, accused Ukraine's European allies of sabotaging U.S.-led efforts to end the war, calling their demands absolutely unacceptable. And coinciding with Witkoff's trip, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky went to Ireland, continuing his visits to European countries that have helped sustain Ukraine's fight against Russia's invasion. Ireland is officially neutral and is not a member of NATO, but has sent non-lethal military support to Ukraine.
America is taking serious steps to end this war, one way or another, and our task, and I'm sure that this is our common task for everyone in Europe, is to really end this war, the war, not just to get a pause in the fighting. We need a decent, dignified peace.
Zelensky said he was expecting reports later in the day from the U.S. envoys on whether talks could move forward. This after President Trump's initial 28-point plan was earlier whittled down to 20. The key obstacles over whether Kyiv should cede land to Moscow and how to ensure Ukraine's future security appear unresolved. Back at the White House, sitting next to the president, Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
That's not our war. It's not the president's war. This war started, it never would have happened if you'd been president. But this war is going on, and the president is trying to end it, not because, listen, we got a million things to focus on in the world as a country, but he's the only leader in the world that can help end it.
Now, at that cabinet meeting today, President Trump also told reporters he's waiting for an update regarding those peace talks in Moscow, where it's several hours ahead, and his peace plan relies on Europe to provide the bulk of the financing and security guarantees for a post-war Ukraine. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are keeping a close eye on that meeting today between Russian President Vladimir Putin and U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. Republicans and Democrats both say President Trump is in a good position to end the war despite some misgivings about the peace proposal, but they differ on whether his administration can seal the deal.
Now what we need is presidential leadership to work in partnership with Congress to put more pressure on Putin. Otherwise, there's no reason for him to come to the table. His goal is to conquer Ukraine, and he is gradually, slowly, brutally, purposefully murdering Ukrainians.
What I would encourage the president to do is to unleash Ukraine and let them purchase what they need to end the war. So, I mean, that's not a bad thing for them to be buying American military equipment.
A House committee is taking up a slate of legislation aimed at protecting kids and their privacy online, but the bills are receiving criticism for being too weak. The House Energy and Commerce Committee is considering 19 pieces of legislation, including a new version of the Kids Online Safety Act that sailed through the Senate last year before stalling out in the House. Lawmakers say it's another push to safeguard the nation's youth from the dangers of social media and new artificial intelligence tools. But parents who lost children to online dangers and activists are speaking out against what they see as a weaker version of the act. Maureen Flatley, president of Stop Child Predators, joins me now to discuss the bills. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So the House heard more than a dozen bills today regarding online child safety. In your opinion, will these bills actually help children?
I really don't think so. I watched the hearing, and of course, I've been working on this issue for a long time. And it really felt a lot like Congress was rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, actually. The issue for me and for a lot of us is that by ignoring the actual criminals who are perpetrating these crimes against kids, we're not only not solving the problem, we're encouraging more abuse online. So I really feel that in addition to the obvious constitutional issues, the parental rights issues, that these bills are really missing the mark.
Can you explain more about the AI regulation moratorium to protect children proposed by President Trump and Senator Ted Cruz?
Sure. I'm a huge fan of the moratorium proposal, and this is why. I have spent 40 years watching the states create meaningless rules and laws around kids, have not had tremendous results with children. The last time I checked, there were 1,071 bills introduced in all 50 states around AI. There is no way that these regulations aren't going to be in conflict. Many of them are ill-informed. And at the end of the day, AI is not just interstate commerce, it's global commerce. So my feeling is very strongly that we need to pump the brakes on these state initiatives, and we need to stop and take a look at this AI issue. And quite frankly, we need a Marshall Plan. We need a moonshot. We need something that's visionary and big that puts guardrails in place, but doesn't sort of throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Many U.S. lawmakers say they're working to protect children online. So what's missing from the conversation they're having on Capitol Hill?
Well, you know, there were 19 bills under consideration today. I think I've read all of them. And I know some of the members who were speaking at the hearing, and I think that they're all well-intended. But the problem is they don't seem to be connecting the dots. I'll use as an example Sammy's Law, which is a bill that arose from a horrible and tragic situation where a young boy, Sammy, bought drugs on a social media platform and subsequently died of an overdose. There's been a tremendous amount of talk about penalizing the platform, but there has been zero talk about penalizing the drug dealer. So that drug dealer is still out there victimizing kids. Same thing with the sextortion cases. There's a global gang based in Nigeria, the Yahoo Boys, who have been responsible for a huge amount of abuse online. The tech companies are mandated reporters. They're calling in millions of cyber tips every year, many of which are not even examined, much less investigated in any meaningful way. But they're private companies. It's as if they're calling 911 roughly 30 million times a year, but the police are only coming a small percentage of the time. When they call the government to complain that no one's answering their 911 calls, the government tells them, well, if you don't get rid of the criminals yourself, we're going to sue you. Well, they're private companies and they can't do that. So the whole conversation has been sort of hinged on a false predicate. And until we start to focus on the law enforcement piece of this, the problems are going to continue to grow. And the other concern that I have that is no small thing is that these are decisions that parents should be making. And so to a great extent, the way these bills are framed is both, you know, somewhat condescending to parents and certainly overreaching. And I can certainly assure you, having monitored the child welfare system in the U.S. for many years, the government makes a terrible parent.
Maureen Flatley, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We have a lot more still to come on EWTN News Nightly. High stakes vote, why an election in Tennessee could be a gauge of things to come in the U.S. And the Supreme Court hears a case in which the state of New Jersey is targeting pro-life pregnancy centers. Find out why. A high-stakes special election is underway today in Tennessee. Voters in the 7th Congressional District are heading to the polls to fill a vacant U.S. House seat. The race is widely seen as the first national test ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Polling shows the race is tightening between Republican Matt Van Epps and Democrat Afton Bain. The district typically favors Republicans by a wide margin, but recent polls show it's a tight contest. Both political parties have invested heavily, viewing this as a measure for voter sentiment, campaign messaging, and the future of the Republican House majority. The results could impact the political landscape for the next 2 years. The Supreme Court heard arguments today in a case where the Attorney General of New Jersey is targeting pro-life pregnancy centers, asking for confidential documents. The case involves First Choice Women's Resource Centers, a faith-based nonprofit that provides resources to women who face unplanned pregnancies. The New Jersey Attorney General demanded the Resource Center provide a list of its donors and internal communications. First Choice says this infringes their First Amendment rights and will deter donors from giving in the future. A decision is expected next June. Caleb Dalton, senior counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, joins us now to discuss the details of the case. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks so much for having me.
The Supreme Court seems poised to rule in favor of First Choice. Tell us more about the case and what's at stake here.
Well, we think New Jersey had a bad day in court today, and rightly so. This case is about whether or not state officials can be held accountable when they harass their political and ideological opponents and weaponize the justice system against them, whether they can be held accountable in federal court. And we're hopeful that the court today, based on what we heard, we're hopeful that they rule in favor of First Choice and allow them to have their day in federal court.
It seems that the state of New Jersey is targeting First Choice for its deceptive website. Let's take a listen.
I just want to be clear about the facts. In response to Justice Thomas, when you were describing the premise for seeking this donor information, et cetera, you were mentioning that it was a misleading website. So is what the state wanted to do with the donor names and addresses is to contact them to figure out if they thought they'd been donating to an abortion clinic as opposed to a pregnancy care center?
I wouldn't frame it in exactly those terms, but I think we're looking at whether or not the donors have potentially been deceived. And I think if you look at...
That would be the subject of the deception, right? I gather that you think the website might have made them think that this was an entity that provided abortion care as opposed to a pro-life entity? So that was the concern?
Yeah, that's right, Your Honor.
Will donors be deceived by this nonprofit? And is the state targeting First Choice for being pro-life?
First Choice is absolutely clear about what they do. And every donor that donates, there's absolutely no evidence. Justice Thomas asked the Attorney General, have you ever received a complaint about this? And the answer was no. What the Attorney General is doing here is harassing First Choice Pregnancy Resource Centers that provides these resources to women in need, harassing them because they would like to provide women with the opportunity to choose life. Evidence shows that when women have the type of resources that First Choice provides to them, they're more likely to choose to keep their unborn child. And that's what First Choice is there doing. And the Attorney General is harassing them simply because they hold a different ideological view than the Attorney General. And just to make a point about the websites, that is absolutely disingenuous for the Attorney General to claim that there could be some sort of misinformation here, because what we know is, first of all, First Choice is clear that they're pro-life, but not only that, the Attorney General doesn't need that donor information. If he truly thought there was something untoward going on, he actually doesn't need that information. It's an objective test, and he failed to meet that test today.
Caleb Dalton, thank you so much for your insights.
Thanks for having me.
Up next on EWTN News Nightly, working remote. Despite his trip overseas, Pope Leo still has his day-to-day tasks to complete, including some big news for one U.S. diocese. Welcome back. Pope Leo has appointed Bishop Mario Aviles as the new bishop of Corpus Christi. The 56-year-old Mexican-born Oratorian will oversee more than 200,000 Catholics across 12 southern Texas counties. He served as auxiliary bishop of Brownsville since 2018. Born in Mexico City, he studied for the priesthood in his home country and in Rome. He was ordained at the age of 28 in San Juan, Texas, before rising to key leadership roles in the Oratorian community, including a post in Rome. Outgoing Bishop Michael Mulvey, who's led the diocese since 2010, says the faithful, quote, welcome Bishop designate Aviles with open hearts and deep prayer. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, you can follow us on social media, Facebook, X, YouTube, and Instagram at EWTN News Nightly. I'm Veronica Dudo. Good night and God bless.